good. So, for example, would you agree that healthier families is a good thing?
Yeah, well, we haven't established what I think a family is yet.
Okay. Do you think healthier families, in your view, is a good thing?
Yeah, in my view, a healthier. But hang on, we're equivocating though, because I don't want to talk past each other and equivocate. Where you say family, I say family, and we pretend that we're saying the same thing. To me, a family can be a cross-generational or nuclear family unit. I think the cross-generational unit's even better than the nuclear family unit. I think that if it's the case that you take away the female or male component from the family, it necessarily weakens it. Weakens it.
Based on
and
what
here's why.
Evidence
well, not only available evidence, but we can see what the outcomes are. When children have the mom and the father inside of the home, and we also see what happens with single motherhood, the rates of abuse, various things like this when the father is not in the home. And this is usually initiated by women. Women are the ones who are the overwhelming initiators of the destruction of that family unit.
Sure. So from the data set that I've seen and what I've looked at regarding the health and well-being of children, it is true that children do better in a house where there's a mom and a dad than just a mom or just a dad. But that's because there's two parents in the house, not necessarily
Then explain lesbians.
What?
Then
What do you
explain
mean?
the lesbian conditions.
What about
the rates of domestic
conditions?
abuse with lesbians and the outcome for lesbian children is not the same as that of gay men. They do not have the same outcomes.
So all that would prove then is that two men can raise a child, but then maybe two women shouldn't.
So then you think that, I just want to make sure that two lesbians raising a child, we should be, because that's not so healthy then.
If the data shows that it would lead to worse outcomes for the child, no, because if you're making an argument about domestic violence rates, which I haven't looked that much into,
No, it's also abuse rates towards children.
Once again, conditionally on that statement being true, then it would probably not be best for the children.
Okay.
So I'm in agreement
so those alternative lifestyles. So if two gay men, right, they have a child, and I was able to prove, that the children of gay men inside of the narrow study set, right, that you've probably looked at, I don't know if you have the studies handy, but I'm sure that I can reference them really quick, that the outcomes are just a little bit worse for children. If they're raised by homosexuals rather than adopted by heterosexuals. And we know that every single child in the United States gets adopted, every single one, all of them, 100%.
Right? Like not foster care,
Then that would make a good case for why homosexual men probably shouldn't be allowed to adopt, right?
I don't think that's the case.
Why?
And here's the reason, because I bet there are certain heterosexual relationships among certain people that are better than others. So you talked about, wait a second, but you're saying if it's
hold on,
no, but you're saying, fine. Would you say an intergenerational family, you talk about that, you said that's better than the regular nuclear family, right? Generally.
Yeah.
So would you say that because an intergenerational family is better, that therefore regular nuclear families are
because
bad?
Both of those family units, right, are still superior to any of these alternative family units.
Well, hold on, but you made the claim that if gay men who are raising a child, it's slightly
I'm not
worse.
a utilitarian.
No, But you're saying it's
you're a
slightly
harm
worse.
reductionist, not me.
No, I never made a claim of harm reduction.
Yes, you did.
You're ascribing this to me.
Are you a harm reductionist?
I'm not making that argument here.
Are you a harm reductionist?
You're trying to pin me down.
Just answer the fucking question. Are you?
I would say largely I ascribe to threshold deontology. So not just utilitarianism.
No, threshold deontology.
I think it's
Where's
both.
the threshold before we switch to utilitarianism?
I don't think that there are black and white answers to a lot of these questions. And that's because I don't want to ascribe a worldview, Andrew.
Okay, I just want to make sure I got this right. You're a threshold deontologist. So I just make sure I got this right. Threshold deontology is you believe in a universal form of ethics up to some threshold, and then you switch over to utilitarianism.
I think there's a balancing act between the two. I don't think that there is.
So what's the threshold?
I don't think there is one threshold for every single situation.
So
I can't
intuition.
No. Wait a second, Andrew. Just because we can't draw a specific line in the sand where two things differ doesn't necessarily mean there isn't a difference. It's the same thing as a Sorites paradox, and it's the same thing with the fallacy of the heap and the pile.
Yeah. Okay. So the thing is, that's fair. If you want to say that there's a threshold fallacy in there where you can't ascribe from when one thing changes to another thing, right? I just want you to remember later in the debate that you said that when I make that same fallacy back when we get to a different topic. But just remember that you said that.
Fine.
Okay, great.
Sure.
So we have that.
Yes.
Now, back to feminism and why it's so great for society. Let's start with how does it reinforce heterosexual normative behaviors in society? How does it do that?
What do you mean heterosexual normative behavior? Like that they ought to act in a specific way? I don't think it does, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, okay, so why is that a good thing?
Because I think it's better if individuals have a more expansive version of masculinity or femininity that they can adopt into. So I don't think the man, wait a second, I don't think the man always has to be the provider, and I don't think that the woman always has to be the stay-at-home
Yeah, those aren't
individual.
masculine or feminine traits.
Well, that's largely things we ascribe to masculinity.
Oh,
and
is it?
femininity.
What is masculinity first?
Well, it's hard to say exactly what it is. I mean,
Well, what do you consider it to be?
I think it is considered a lot of traits such as, I don't know, courage,
Do you
confidence,
think that
assertiveness. I don't
men-
think they're real. I don't think they're actually real categories.
Do you
They're-
think that if a man is sick and he's in the hospital, right, because he has cancer, that other men consider him to be less of a man because his wife's providing?
No,
No,
but
of
wait
course
a second.
not.
But it's not. But it's not.
Of course not.
It's not based exactly
Wouldn't she
on
be
that.
considered more feminine, in fact, by the fact that she's taking care of him while he's so sick, she's doing her wifely duty?
I don't think necessarily. But I don't think you can also ascribe masculinity and femininity to these rigid categorizations of things.
Yeah. So what is it? What is it then? What is masculinity? What is it?
I don't think there is a comprehensive thing. I actually agree. I don't think that masculinity and femininity are good categories to go off of because it reinforces already gendered norms there. So I don't I'm not really positioned.
Well,
on
let me
this.
give you a counter then.
Okay.
The reason that we utilize masculinity and the reason that we utilize femininity is because we're ascribing virtues to men and women, and they're shared virtues. So you would agree with me that courage is a shared virtue between men and women?
Yes, but
hang on.
Okay.
You would agree with me that temperance, shared virtue. You would agree with me that generosity,
Correct.
perhaps shared virtue, things like this, right?
And they aren't exercised differently.
What's that?
And I don't think they're exercised differently.
I'm not even saying that.
Okay.
So
Fine,
let's
yes, they're
start with
shared virtues.
So you agree
I'm
that they're
fine with that.
shared, right?
Yeah.
But here's the problem,
Okay.
and here's where we get masculinity from. If it is the case that one sex does or does not apply one of these virtues, the social cohesiveness and the destruction to society drastically increases in comparison to the other sex. Meaning, let's take courage, for instance. Okay? Now, if females, right, lost courage when it came to dealing with intruders and things like this, right? If courage was not kind of on the menu there for social protection, right? Society would get objectively worse.
Yeah.
You would agree, right?
I think so. Yeah,
But
much
if
worse.
men lost courage, there wouldn't be fucking society at all. And so that's why it's ascribed as a masculine virtue. Because if men don't apply this virtue, society fails. Or if women don't apply this virtue, social cohesion and society begins its collapse.
Okay, fine. But I don't see how that necessarily boxes things into masculinity or femininity. I think if women started not...
How does it not?
Hold on. I think...
How does it
hold on,
not,
wait,
bro?
Can I explain?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I don't think that if women just suddenly stopped expressing courage, it depends. We'd have to define what courage means. What if women, by courage, you're courageous, maybe a woman doesn't want to get out
Literally
of bed and raise her
whatever
child.
definition.
Okay, fine. If she doesn't want to take care of her children, if every single woman decided they weren't going to take care of their children and, let's say, I don't know, breastfeed their children, do the normal things that you would ascribe that women either ought to do in their role, I think that would lead to the downfall of society.
Well, let me give you an easier one. Temperance. Just take temperance, for instance.
Okay.
Temperance is necessary for both sexes in order to even have virtues to begin with.
Sure.
But if women become hysterical versus when men become hysterical, the side effects of this are much, much worse when men become hysterical versus women. Yeah?
Why? Why, though?
Because they're way fucking stronger.
I also think they exercise their hysteria in a more violent way. So I think
Because
that-
they're way fucking stronger.
I don't think just because someone's stronger necessarily...
When women are hysterical, they become very violent, just like men do. The distinction is they can't do as much damage.
Okay.
And so if that's the case, then when we look at this virtue, for instance, if men lose control of that virtue, it's way fucking worse than if women do, right? That's why it's masculine versus feminine. Virtues are associated with the masculine and the feminine.